Are we
stuck out in the woods with a dead battery and find out, read about it in the, So in my building stuff, I never did new materials with customers. I experimented on my own properties. If there's something
Yep.
new, I experimented with that, and that was, so that was fun. Because I like it. I like experimenting with the new stuff, but I don't want to be the guinea pig. Didn't want
Yeah.
my paying customers to be guinea pigs either.
You need a copy of this?
No, I have one.
We went,
So James has said we're on the air,
okay,
just so you know. Haven't called it to order yet, but just so you know.
okay.
You will now be placed into conference. After joining the call, to record the conference for those who may miss this call, or for future playback, press *2.
Hello.
Anybody there? Okay. I'll just leave that open.
Okay. We may have Beth from,
There's somebody. Who's on the line, please? Oh, hey, Elizabeth. We're about to get started.
Great, and just want to make sure you heard my colleague from MHP, Carol Burr, is also on the call.
Oh, great. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
all right. Well, it is 3 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And the first thing on the agenda is introductions. Start with Bill.
Bill Gabler, Commissioner from the West End, District 5, and happy to be here.
Chris O'Brien, Commissioner from District 4, also happy to be here.
James Yorkie, County Administrator.
Mary Somnus, District 3, I think it is, and happy to be here.
Lawrence Doe, out from Hovland, glad to be here also.
County Commissioner from, Stacy Hawkins, County Commissioner from District 2.
And Ann Sullivan, County Commissioner from District 4.
All right. Chris Gildem let us know that he wouldn't be able to attend today. Beth Drost from the EDA may be joining on the phone, or we'll catch up with her next time. And then, as you heard, on the phone are Elizabeth and Carol with Minnesota Housing Partnership, who will be on the agenda in a little bit here. The next order of business is to approve the December meeting minutes. Thank you, James, for the great job on those. A motion to approve or comments?
Yeah.
That was a motion, Chris?
That was a motion. I'll move to approve, yeah.
Okay.
Thought they were fine.
I'll second.
And second, Bill. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. And then, an update on the recruitment process.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you to this board for your work in getting the job description for the executive director updated. We talked about that at the December meeting, and subsequently were able to post it with the changes that you all recommended at the December meeting. So it's been posted since, I forget what date it went up, but it was right around Christmas.
Just before Christmas, I
Yeah.
think it was posted, yeah?
And at this point, we have 4 applicants. The application deadline is this Friday. And I think we've got some good candidates to choose from already. And with any luck, we'll maybe have a couple more applications turned in before the Friday deadline. So I'm excited about that. And we've got I think in terms of how we do this, what I'll do is, after Friday, send out the applications that we've received so that you all can review them. And at that point, we can make a determination about whether we want to keep the job announcement open for a little bit longer as we're starting the process of interviewing folks. A field of 4 is not super big, and I think it's not so much that we need a lot of applications. We certainly need the right applicants, and I think we do have some strong ones already. But my feeling is when you're doing a recruitment process like this, it's probably not a bad idea to keep the announcement open for a little while as you're doing first round interviews, so that if there are any kinds of issues, that there's still a pool to choose from.
More. Would you change the date then at that time and extend it like another month or something?
Well,
how would you do that?
Yeah, a lot of times, the way these things are posted, and we said application deadline was the 21st, but, a lot of times, an announcement will call out a first review of applications by a certain date. But the announcement stays open after that date, so that applications can continue to be received. And so that's one possible way we could do this. I think it's wise to keep options open, even if we feel we have strong candidates in a small pool. There are any number of reasons why somebody who's well qualified for a job and who in fact wants to take the job might not be able to accept it. Housing being one of those. So, I would recommend that we do keep it open beyond the 21st. And
So James, what does that look like in the formats where it's been posted? Is it like a reposting? Because if we just keep running it and somebody sees that date, they'll look at it and say, well, it's passed. How does that work?
Well,
What's the mechanics
if
of
people want to be considered in the first pool, which is to your advantage, right? If you're in the first group of candidates, then you can be assured some consideration, where if you miss that date, then you're in the next pool, and so you become effectively a backup. So that's how I've seen those processes work, and that's what I would suggest.
So just leave the posting as it is with the.
Well, or repost it,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It feels like we would have to put another date, because as Lawrence said, if I saw that it was deadline January 21st, then I wouldn't submit anything, right?
Well, no, you would, because you would want the job, right?
If it's after the deadline?
I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing what you just said.
So the deadline for applications says January 21st.
Correct.
So if I see it on January 23rd, I'm going to say, oh, I missed the deadline.
Right. No, we would update the announcement to say first review of applications, 21st, but the announcement will remain open.
Okay.
Yeah.
So make that clear.
Sorry if I wasn't clear about that.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to say the same thing, but, okay,
Well,
that's helpful.
Madam Chair, should we have a motion to that effect, acknowledging that James would leave the position open for further applications, subject to a date to be determined?
I think that would be a good thing to do, yes.
Then I'd make that motion.
All right. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Lawrence,
Yeah.
all right. Any further discussion? All right then, hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 4-0.
And then just to kind of reiterate some of the discussion we had last month. So it was Chairwoman Somnus and Commissioner Gabler who volunteered to participate in the first round of interviews. Everybody will have the opportunity, as I said, to look at all the applications and provide feedback. And we had talked about establishing a scoring matrix that, Chris, I believe you volunteered to develop. So once we have all the applications, we'll get those out. And then if you want to send me that matrix, and actually, I mean, I have, if it would be helpful to you, I've got the matrix that we use to review applications for this commission.
Okay.
That you could just use as a template.
Sure, that's fine.
That
Yep.
way you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
So you're going to send the template
I
to
will.
Chris?
And I'll just modify it per the
Yep.
position description that we posted
Yep.
and recirculate that.
Yep.
Okay, and will we include both Commissioner Hawkins and Sullivan in the scoring, or just the board members? And yourself? How do you guys fit into the scoring?
Well, they're my bosses, so I'm not going to answer that question.
He's a smart
And I'm the
man.
alternate, so Commissioner Hawkins.
Well, and that's why you're still their employee.
I think it'd be helpful to have your insights.
I would like to give input.
I think that'd
We
be very
certainly
helpful.
have
Yeah.
background.
Both of you and James.
Yeah,
I think
I think that's helpful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the more the better, I think. More
Yeah.
eyes, more minds. Okay, so 8 of us will be doing the scoring. And then, as James stated, only 2 commissioners can be on the selection committee, otherwise it becomes a public meeting, and you don't want to do interviews in a public setting.
Right.
Later on in the process, we can become more public, but, and then at the last meeting of the EDA, we invited Beth and one of the EDA board members, and Beth has agreed to sit on the selection committee, and Commissioner Sullivan as an EDA board member, with that, with her other hat on.
The other hat.
EDA hat on. So then, should we set, or did we set a deadline for when the scoring, if they come, the deadline's Friday, let's say you send us
I think the timeline was like a week.
I think, we,
Around.
yeah,
for scoring?
Yeah.
yes.
So the 28th, by January 28th, everybody will submit their scores to James, correct?
Yes.
And then he can share with us the
And I'll s-
anonymous summary, right?
Right, and I'll send out an email with instructions and the deadline and everything, so you don't have to
Remember
write
that?
that down.
And then one other thing that came up since our last meeting, Chris Skildum emailed and he wanted to offer some questions for the interview process. And James and I spoke in email in response to that, and we've agreed that everyone should submit questions for the interview process, even if you can't be on the selection committee. If you have questions that you would like us to ask the candidates, send those to James also.
I asked that question of Chairman Deschamps a couple of weeks ago, and so he had just one question, and I texted that to James. So can that be part of the interview? I think it's general enough that that's gonna, I think that question's gonna pop up a
Yeah,
lot.
you texted it, or did you send an email?
No, I texted it with an attachment.
okay.
I sent it on Sunday. I told you in there not to open it till Monday because I hoped that you had some time off to recoup.
Okay, I think I missed that, but I'll look for that for
Okay,
sure.
all right,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
Great, thank you. Okay. And then we'll see how it goes from there, one step at a time.
Okay.
First the scoring, then the first round of interviews, and we'll see where we're at.
Is anybody coming from far away of the 4 applicants so far?
We don't have anybody from real far away, no.
Okay. I'm wondering if during the interview process, if we need to put somebody up or something like that, if it's an overnight.
No, I don't well, they're going to be remote interviews,
Oh.
at least, yes.
Okay.
At least initially.
Oh, okay.
If not, for
Okay.
the finals too, just
Okay.
because of where we are with the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah. Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else on the recruitment process? Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, then we'll move to the next agenda item, which is our conversation with the Minnesota Housing Partnership about our relationship with them, any potential relationship that the HRA has with MHP via the memorandum with the EDA. And maybe I'll just preface this by saying, for clarity again, that memorandum expires at the beginning of April or the end of April?
It says it was extended to May 22.
I mean, May. Yeah.
Yep.
So, anything, keep that in mind. The context of this conversation is between now and May 22nd. Okay? And depending on when we get our executive director on board, we might be able to do some things with the Minnesota Housing Partnership, some training or education or something before we have an executive director, or we might do it after the fact. But I'll let Elizabeth or James, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I'll invite Elizabeth to speak, but I did want to note the end of the MOA is May 22nd, but I do recall Elizabeth saying that, to wind things down, really, we should be looking at kind of the end of March as the effective end date. So any kind of substantive work that we would want to do, we'd want to get done ideally before the end of March. That's what I recall, and I'll let Elizabeth add to that.
Thanks, James, and, Mr. Yorkie, and again, my name's Elizabeth Glidden with the Minnesota Housing Partnership, and I think, first let me just kind of touch on this point about the time frame of our work. So MHP has had an existing MOU with the EDA that, now is in excess of a year. We were fortunate to get that memorandum of understanding extended, which allows us to continue our work a little bit further, but our end date, as was noted, is May 22nd. This is actually a question that I can bring back to the MHP admin team about what is the strict cutoff date. I know that for most assignments, they do like us to wind them up ahead of time, but sometimes they can be accommodating at least as much as they can of special circumstances. And so I will double check that so I can bring that back, and we can reconfirm to you what would be the date we'd be able to work up towards. We have had some conversation about what is covered under the MOU, and then also what would be helpful to the HRA. And again, it's the EDA that holds the memorandum of understanding, but as I understand from the EDA's director, we are here to kind of understand from the HRA board what would be helpful, and then MHP would be able to respond to that. Our MOU categories, and I know you've reviewed that MOU, but just to emphasize to you, are designed to be broad. So again, we talk about in the MOU supporting the HRA's organizational development. There are some examples of what that could involve, but again, you can think fairly broadly in what would be helpful, either in terms of education around processes, around programs. Really, I think it's up to you to identify what do you think would be helpful. Another provision within the MOU that I might direct you to is kind of an overlap with this, but it also directs us to be able to provide technical assistance around researching and implementing tools, policies, and programs, and there are some examples there. So again, it's a very broad category. One thing I might just note to you, we've talked about trainings and education and what is appropriate perhaps before an executive director might be on board and what is appropriate after an executive director might be on board. But one additional way I thought I might just suggest to you to think about things is that we can also provide background research. And so that might just be another way to think about something or a topic that you would like some assistance in providing some background on. And then that could be further evaluated or analyzed at the discretion of that executive director once that person is on board and thus able to work, in concert with the HRA board. So I just wanted to mention that too, that it doesn't always have to be something that is a training opportunity or kind of an engagement opportunity, but it also could include background research or other things, again, trying to provide information that will be helpful to you. My colleague Carol Burr is on the phone, and both of us are here and able to really just hear from you what might be of interest, what you might have questions about, and then I think we're to take that back and then figure out, how could we implement any of the suggestions that come from you, or what would be those next steps to make final decisions on anything that might be of interest. But we just want to make sure that you are able to take advantage of technical assistance, because we have hours that are assigned and available to Cook County. Carol and I are here and able to respond to you. And I know it's challenging as you are still in this important process of hiring an executive director, but just wanted to make that of note to you.
I have
I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Yeah, Elizabeth, this is Chris O'Brien. Just had a question. So, one example of research that had come to mind that might be useful. I reviewed the 2015 housing study, and that was very helpful in terms of looking at trends up to 2015. I think that there's some anecdotal data that I've heard about the impact that's accelerated since 2015 of housing that was formerly rental housing that's now being used exclusively for Airbnb type of short-term rentals. And would a question like what is the trend, or what has been the what is the data on conversion of rental units to short-term rentals over over the recent years? Is that something that's in the scope of the kind of research that you could do?
That's actually a good question that I might have to take back, because I do not know that there is a readily available data set on that. And I would have to check. We do have a research manager at MHP, but I have to check on that person's available time. Mm-hmm. I don't know about Carol, but I'm not your data guru. Maybe I'll ask Carol, but I might just take note on that. And
again,
that's one where we.
Yeah, that's just one example.
Yeah.
That's one example. I was just curious whether that was in the scope of the kind of research that you'd be able to do.
Right. So maybe I'll just take note of that. I'll just note another kind of look at that is something that had been mentioned and is actually noted in the MOU is something which is looking at what is some comparison of policies that have been adopted impacting short-term rental around the country or specific to Minnesota.
That would be my follow-on, because it's come up at least two of the township meetings I've been at since I've been on the board. Here is a concern about that exact situation, and mentioned that there are apparently active focus in Duluth and Two Harbors, for example, of this question, and it came up also at our small revolving loan committee meeting last week, I think it was, that just it's an issue there. The conclusion was that's really a county board issue as a policy, probably, which makes sense, but it's also one in which we'd have an interest. So that might be helpful too, just what are other communities doing in that situation. Thanks. That was Bill Gabler. Sorry.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, sir.
Carol, did you want to speak to that question?
No, I agree with, I'm sorry, I have dogs in the background here. But I agree with Elizabeth, and we would need to ask our research people if they would have availability to look into that.
Okay. All
Or
right.
her on that.
Lawrence has a question.
Yeah, this is Lawrence Doe. I'm real interested as to what the legal and financial tools are that we can use to assure that that properties are kept in either homesteaded or long-term rentals. And I know there's a few things, but I'm wondering, there's probably a bunch of other aspects where we could develop properties with that caveat. So can you give us a list of what kind of legal and financial tools would be available to us?
Yeah, so that seems kind of similar to, or some of it might be an overlap actually with the other topic, looking at short-term rentals and what are other tools where the public has power to provide some conditions. I think this might be one where we want to just make sure we would fully understand the purpose of the research. But again, that seems like some general policy research and looking for examples from peer communities where that is certainly something that we could do.
You know, one of the examples that I was surprised by in some of the reading that we've done is that some of the workforce housing, quote unquote, met its financial obligations and was allowed to go to market rate rentals. It was a subsidized workforce housing project that converted over to market rate rental, and I was quite surprised by that.
So that might be something that's a more general kind of educational piece, because it applies just, what are the tools where you can, again, put conditions,
Yeah.
and then what is the scope of those conditions, and, when does that power expire, and how does that sit within, just the general property rights that a property owner would then have. But this is a common question, I think, asked by a lot of government jurisdictions. What is our power to set some conditions?
Okay, thank you.
Actually, Bill Gabler again, could I raise that up from a fairly specific concern, which is worth looking into, but to a larger question? I noticed in the MOU one of the opportunities available is training and development of the staff and board. How about a legal review of the HRA powers? I've been at that law, and it's complex, and there's plenty of them, but perhaps just a real basic bread and butter understanding of here specifically are some of the powers of an HRA, perhaps by a lawyer if you've got one on staff, or if you've got a similar somebody with similar expertise, that'd probably be helpful, just as a basic grounding of where we're starting with, or what we're starting with as powers, and then we can develop our own thoughts of how to use those to help specific issues, VRBO included, I suppose.
Yes, that sounds like a really important foundational training.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, like with some of these, the question is, once we collect the ideas, what are the trainings where MHP might provide the training or a background research document, and where might we assist in identifying guest speakers or other key experts or peers that could be part of, sharing with you on these key topics.
Thank you. And this is Mary. I think I have a couple of questions. One is, have you had any conversation with Beth at the EDA about updating that workforce housing study from 2015 and/or expanding it to include other aspects of housing? Because that was very narrowly focused on workforce. It didn't include seniors or accessible or other kinds of niches in the housing market.
It listed some of that, but you're right.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, have you had discussion with Beth about that study, for the older study, the current study?
Yeah. So Beth did forward a question to me, but I do not recall we discussed it in depth. It might be, she has spent quite a bit of recent time working on the applications for the Workforce Housing Development Program.
Yep.
I might note on doing the workforce housing study or whatever is a redefined study, those are important things to perform for a jurisdiction. MHP would not be the entity that would do that, but we often support, putting together the process for an RFP and how then to scope out the study.
Okay.
And Kara might have some thoughts on that, but those are common things that we assist with.
Exactly, Elizabeth. That's what we do. We contract that to another organization that actually does that work.
Okay. Stacy or Ann, any questions at this time?
I just am really interested in the other types of housing beyond workforce. Just knowing the discussion from the EDA about accessible housing, maybe a group home for people with disabilities. We are the only county in the state of Minnesota that does not have a group home.
Mm.
And so I think that is something to take a look at, and then also senior housing. Thinking about the fact we have no group home, we have families who have to travel very, very long distances to get services, and if they have someone in their family that is placed in a group home, they have hundreds of miles they have to travel to go and visit. It is a very difficult situation.
Mm-hmm.
And to be one of 87 counties that doesn't have one is something I'm surprised at.
And I'm just having a little bit, this is Elizabeth, a little bit of trouble hearing those comments.
So Elizabeth, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So my comment was that critical to our work will be getting more information not only on workforce housing, but accessible housing, housing for our continuing and increasing in size our senior population, and then last, looking at the possibility of a group home. We are the only one of 87 counties in Minnesota that does not have a group home for those with disabilities. And so that is a major concern in our community.
And then.
Thank you so much.
And also mentioned earlier, senior housing. We don't have that data. We've been hearing a lot anecdotally over the years about the need, but we haven't done any data mining around that.
Yeah, I thought that the workforce study was useful in just showing exactly where the population, by age category, where the population is shrinking and growing, and it's clearly shrinking in the 35 to 55 and blowing up above that. So.
Yeah. Stacy, anything at this time?
Well, I guess I agree, we kind of need to look at that study again and make sure we have numbers. Now, I really appreciate when I looked at that 2015 study also, it made me realize what's going on, but I think part of the reason the shrinkage of that age group is because they have no place to live.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I really would like, because personal family members, that left because there was no place they can afford to live. So I really want to make sure that we're looking, yes, I think we should look at all aspects of housing and make sure we know why that is and not just think that we know.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I would add, I did a summary of all the housing projects that I knew of, workforce housing, that I knew of in the 5 years that I've been back, and there were 60 units of workforce housing developed throughout the county. 26 of them by one roof, and the rest by small independent developers. Chris Gildem converted Hill Haven into 6 apartments that weren't apartments before, and, workforce. So there is that too. We lost some maybe to short term, but we also gained some from people who invested. The Hamilton Habitat and others have been doing great work. And we have right now, with any luck at all, potentially 20 apartments coming online next year. So I think updating our information would probably be helpful, especially once we have an executive director and we're starting to look at other funding sources. I think we need more current information for those purposes. So, Chris?
Yeah, just one other possible question. A question that I have, there's something that I don't understand, is the requirements on employers who employ H-2A visa workers. And my understanding is that those contracts are required the employers are required to provide housing. I'd like, and I guess my curiosity is whether there's some opportunity to get creative there and leverage that requirement with, with some better quality housing or more permanent housing. I don't know much about it, but I'd be curious to better understand how that works, because we do have a lot of H-2A or
H-2B.
H-2B, and then post-COVID, we hopefully we'll have H-2B again.
Yes. There are actually some have been able to come back. There are some international workers who stay in the country. They're only allowed to stay in one location for a certain number of days, weeks, months. I can't remember exactly, but then they have to move. And there are some of our local businesses who employ those folks for the time they're allowed to be here. Then they go somewhere else in the United States and work for a while, and then they can come back here again. So we do have not as many as we have. We have, historically, we have brought between 300 and 400 international workers a year to Cook County, and I don't think we're anywhere near that number right now, but they have been able to start coming back some. So that's helpful. And that is also a critical need for our businesses. It fills some jobs that our American domestic workers don't want, no matter the pay scale, they're just not applying for them. So it's part of the nature of our hospitality economy. I think it's standard in the industry. All right, and then of course, I would just also remind this group that anything that the HRA is bringing to you today, Elizabeth, that you would need to take that up with the EDA for their agreement. And, you know, if there's going to be any education and training opportunities, maybe they would also like to participate so that we're all understanding similar kinds of things.
Thank you. Yes, that's understood.
Yep. Yep, and just for us to understand that, you know, we can ask this, but it is an MOU with the EDA, so. All right, James, did you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Elizabeth and Carol, any more is there something we're not asking? Oh, Lauren says something.
Yeah, I just would like to reiterate the data. It's hard for me to imagine that we could approach some funding source without having really good and current data about what the statistical needs are in the county. I think that's really primary. So I'd really like to push on how we can get that ASAP.
Thank you.
And Bill?
Thanks. Maybe, Elizabeth, you could just briefly talk about what's going on in the state of Minnesota. I know MHP sent out a email yesterday or today about supporting the governor's request for bonding and use of funds for housing, and I thought that was good. And first of all, if you could be good enough to put all of us on the mailing list for those, that'd be helpful. I get them, but I can send them around, but I think each board member ought to be able to get that kind of information because it's really pretty valuable, and MHP does a great job of lobbying for housing at the state legislature, and we should support that effort.
So what I can do there is I can forward the link where you can sign up, just so you have it right at your fingertips. I can't sign you up. You will have to sign up just because there's, they want to make sure that folks really want to receive our emails if they're getting our emails. And just as a note, that is also kind of a common update that sometimes gets provided, is just an overview of what is happening in the session, or an overview of what are common programs at Minnesota Housing to just increase familiarity with that. It's just the distinction between our technical assistance, of course, does not include any policy advocacy. So that is not what we would be doing, but we would be providing information.
Great, that would be great. If you can send that to James, he can forward it to the board members so everyone can sign up to get on your email list.
Sure.
All right.
Just for folks to know, what the governor did have in his bonding proposal was, and it's a big bonding proposal, was $250 million in housing infrastructure bonds. And so that would be an education piece too, because that doesn't fund all types of housing. It's limited to certain types of housing. And then $60 million in what's called the general obligation bonds, which would support public housing.
And I was recently contacted by Representative Eklund, and I think he mentioned that the legislature would be taking up discussion in this session about some of the federal COVID dollars that they received, and that there might be some interest at the legislature in allocating some of that to housing. Have you heard anything about that, Elizabeth?
So, and I hope I get the amount correct. Last year, the legislature reserved for this year part of, just like local governments in Cook County got a portion of local fiscal recovery funds, there was a larger pot that went straight to the state that has those similar guidance and requirements. It's the Fiscal Recovery Fund. And there is, I believe, well, I'm going to get the number wrong, so I better not say it. But there is a large amount of money that is remaining to be allocated. And certainly some of it could be allocated for housing purposes. I will note that across the country, there are many states that have allocated a portion of those same state American Rescue Plan, Fiscal Recovery Funds for housing purposes, and I'm certain that that will be up for discussion. Sometimes, as you know, what happens, there's a lot of priorities, and then there's changing, conditions that happen, and so you never fully know what's going to happen. But it is good to hear that Representative Eklund believes that that will be one of the priorities that at least is under consideration for use of those funds.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, that was my takeaway from that conversation with him. A little glimmer of hope.
Right. And then just the additional piece is, we are still waiting for the February forecast, but what is anticipated is that our large surplus may grow even more, is what they are saying. And the surplus right now is $7.7 billion. And so there are different objectives on what to do with that surplus, with, I think, the Senate more focused on cost savings and tax savings, and the House more focused on investments or how to prioritize those investments. So that will be, the discussion during the session, or the big picture dynamic, I should say, during the session.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else on this topic? The next thing that I see on the agenda is other. Do we have other business for the board?
Well,
Bill?
I would just report, I've now visited the 3 townships in the West End, just to introduce myself, and found a lot of receptivity, both to the idea of the HRA and the issue of housing, and all the things that have been talked about here. The different types of housing have been mentioned in those sessions as well, workforce housing and housing for people with different needs, and seniors, and you go right down the list. And everybody remarks on how difficult it is, even with people with good salaries and benefits in Cook County, or opportunities for it, looking at the jobs available at the hospital or the county itself, DNR, places like that, to find a spot to live, even if they could get the job. And but I just thought people are, it's really a top of mind focus for these townships at their level, which is, different from the county level, but it's, they're all interested, and I was just grateful for their interest, and grateful to keep the door open with them. The other thing I actually saw in the minutes, we did just mention whether the Grand Portage Band would have an interest in anything, working together or joining forces or whatever, but there wasn't any real specific ask or, takeaway. Can we do this, and should that wait for an executive director, or is that some conversation that could be had in the meantime?
I actually visited with Chairman Deschamps and Chairwoman Spry. The three of us sat down and had a long conversation. And their housing, they said this, they had the same kind of needs as what the county's identified, just like what you said. It's right on down the list. There's shortages. They provide for housing on the reservation for band members. They do not provide any housing of any assistance or any housing of any kind for band members that live off the reservation in the county. So he saw that there would be a need for band members living out in the county for any kind of housing circumstances. He also said that if there's more workforce housing available in Grand Marais, he felt like a number of band members would move off the reservation and move down here. He said there's a lot of band members that work in Grand Marais or even further down the county. And that if there was workforce housing available, that they could use that in that way. When I talked about working with the county or with the HRA around joint building projects, there's a little hesitancy, and I think that the complexity of the governmental funding situations, there's probably some firewalls that would have to be worked around, and that was something that we would think about later, more of the with a specific project, how that could happen. And what I told those two was that any specific project for the band would have to generate from their ideas coming, and then perhaps the HRA could work over jointly with a project like that. But that's we don't have any specifics. They didn't have any specifics right now, other than a generalized need that's the same in the county. So I think that's about it. They were pleased with the HRA's development, the fact that it's actually that it's been started up, and they're just kind of waiting to see what unfolds with that part of it.
Great.
Thanks. That's a good summary of in answer to what I'm raising, and the object wasn't to tell them anything. It's more to get the feedback of what their needs are, and then we can help focus on. Is there something we could do with them to help that?
They have an on-site construction company. They build on-site, so they sort of have their own thing kind of going. But I think there's lots of room for collaborative work. Just need to sort of design the project and go from there. And of course, funding for them like us is always the issue.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I'd raise out of my list is I've had experience helping at homeless shelters in the Twin Cities over the years, and this thought occurred to me, well, what do homeless people do in Cook County? Are there some, and what do they do? And I just happened to ask Pat Campanero that, and she said, well, the only thing I'm aware of is that I come into town to do my laundry because our septic won't hold it won't support a laundry system, and they're open 24/7 and they're heated, and I've seen people who clearly were there overnight. Well, that's one response for homeless, but it just is something to put on the list of things to look at. I don't have any answers to that either, but this is a tough place to be homeless in, I'll say that.
There was an incident at the Homeland Post Office. I shouldn't call it an incident. It was not an incident. But I walked in and there was a gentleman sitting on the floor charging his cell phone in the lobby that was open. And in our conversation, he was living in a camper, and Officer Manning, he had to move on from where he was at. He couldn't be camping there. And so that was, he was sort of playing the homeless shuffle, and there was lots of snow on the ground, it was cold. Yeah. He was looking for firewood.
We've had several discussions over the years about homeless folks and what does that look like in Cook County. And my understanding is that there's a fair amount of what they call couch surfing. So just staying with friends and family and moving along as needed from time to time. And then some, as Lauren said, some just camping where they can, if they can, in someone's back 40 or whatever, you know. It's hard to get at the answer to the question because in some cases they don't want to reveal where they are because maybe it's not quite right. But and yes, it's only there are months of the year that doesn't work. So yeah, that's another group. Chris, did you have anything else?
Nope, not for me.
Lawrence?
No, I don't think so.
Stacy? Ann?
I did have one other item. Mike Roth, the city administrator in Grand Marais, has been a partner in our work with the Minnesota Housing Partnership and the EDA. And as you all may or maybe don't know, the city of Grand Marais has had a HRA for many years, which has mostly been dormant in recent years. And as part of the process to create the countywide HRA, it was the city's intention to take steps to basically disband its own HRA. And I got an email from Mike recently indicating that that effort was moving forward and that they expected that to appear on a city council agenda in February. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Do they have any intellectual capital that might be useful to us?
Nobody's been doing anything with that.
Okay. Okay.
The city has some housing inventory and neighborhood studies. If you go on the city's website, you can find what they have there.
Okay.
So they do have some knowledge about their housing stock or inventory of housing in the city limits, but that's about it. There hasn't been anybody doing that HRA specific work.
Okay.
All right. Well, then I would add one thing. I believe we sent out earlier, James sent out to everyone, there's an opportunity this Friday morning from 9 until noon to participate in a online Northeastern Minnesota housing, I don't remember what it's called, a consortium or a workshop or something along those lines. I am planning to attend. I think Bill said he signed up.
I've
Chris?
registered. I have a schedule conflict, and I called and I contacted the Jeremiah and Jeremy, I guess, and he said that confirmed that it's going to be recorded, so you can watch it.
Oh, great.
So they'll post a link, and so you can watch it later if you have conflict.
All right.
I have a
Excellent.
conflict as well, so that's good
Okay.
to know.
I have a question. I read over the link and I didn't understand the value of that. So could you inform me as to how that would be helpful for me to spend time to watch that? Mm-hmm. And I'm not at all opposed, but I just don't know what the value is for me personally.
Well, having attended these events in the past, I'm not sure what the agenda is for Friday, but typically what happens is agencies that have resources to help with the development of housing share information about their programs and opportunities. And in this conversation, I believe that other communities in northeastern Minnesota will share examples of how they're working to solve their housing problems. So it really is, for me, it's one of the best things to do, to learn and to steal ideas from other people and know what kind of grant programs are coming up that we need to pay attention to. And so
I'll
if you
sign up.
can
Yeah.
join, that would be great, Lawrence.
Yeah.
And then one other thing, I saw this in the, what's it called, the North Shore Journal, the newspaper that we receive in our P.O. boxes. In Two Harbors, I might get thrown out on this one, but in Two Harbors, they're offering incentives to
Yes.
people to build workforce housing, and the money for the incentive is coming from the future property tax that those people will pay for the housing that they're building. So it's kind of like the
Like case
Abatement.
abatement, only it's for individual homeowners. And I think there was, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I feel like it was something like up to $10,000 per house or something like that. So anyway, it's just, what a creative, what a, let's help ourselves kind of I thought that was really interesting. And we might hear more about that on Friday if anyone from Two Harbors is represented at this meeting.
That reminds me, I also, Silver Bay is doing two developments. One is down on the water and the other is up by the golf course. And their strategy to get affordable housing, because most of the housing in Silver Bay it was done for the mine workers, so they're fairly small, modest homes. My aunt and uncle-in-law raised 5 kids in one of these houses, so I've been in one of them in Silver Bay. But their strategy is to build more expensive homes on the golf course, so that folks that are living in these smaller homes want to move into something larger, and then that would open up these smaller places for affordable housing.
Interesting.
I thought that was an interesting strategy. I'm not always sure how those sort of indirect solutions to issues work out. There's sometimes unintended consequences, but I thought that was an interesting thing that Silver Bay is doing.
I can say Silver Bay's got a new economic development director who I've known for years, and he's been a financial advisor there for quite a number of years, and he's a real go-getter. And I am sensing the same thing happening in Two Harbors, where there's other programs as well there, and so I think it shows the value, first of all, in the executive director, somebody who can, actually implement this kind of thing. And so, while I'm also certainly open to leaving the application process open, I'm real excited to get somebody who can start moving on some of these things and keep us in the game. Also, that the session on Friday, if I remember the agenda, they were going to start off with some data exposition of Northeast Minnesota. I don't know how granular it will be, whether it would, Cook County would stand out versus Lake or St. Louis, but there's some data that they'll present, so that'd be a good start too, perhaps, and maybe guide some of our efforts to update that 2015 study.
Will they publish any, when they do these kind of meetings, will they put out, make available any sort of hard copy syllabus or downloadable syllabus that you know of? Is that a possibility?
I don't know. He mentioned that just the recording would be available, but he didn't,
Okay.
I didn't ask about it.
Okay.
I've attended these in the past, the presenters very often share their PowerPoints or their, to some website or something, and then you can go grab them. I'm not sure about this one, but.
My 72-year-old brain works way better with hard copy. I'm sorry. That's just
right. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that the county could help with printed copies of things for us if we
could, sure.
So if you want.
Yeah, I tend to mark stuff up that way, make comments in the margin and sort of keep it almost like journaling, so to speak, and it helps me with continuity from one meeting to the next. It really does.
Yeah.
And the computer never does that for me. I'm not able to work the computer the same way.
I like paper.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Elizabeth or Carol, do you have anything else?
I don't think so.
No, I don't believe so.
All
Thank
right.
you for having us.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and then we'll follow up when you can get with Beth and learn some more about the answers to the questions that you heard today. Perhaps you can join us for our February meeting for more discussion about these things.
That sounds like a good plan, Mrs. Elizabeth.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Sounds good.
Anything else? The next thing I see on the agenda is to adjourn the meeting then.
I'll move to adjourn.
Chris moves,
I'll second it.
Lauren seconds, all those in favor, aye.
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 All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
So, off the record.
Nope. I don't know, we have to be careful about off the record.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
really, once a meeting concludes,
Then we're done.
discussion.
adjourn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.